Frank Sawyer occupies a unique place in fly fishing history, and in my opinion he's one of the best nymph fishermen of all time. I had the pleasure of meeting him more than 30 years ago. I remember a tall, quietly spoken gentleman with time and patience for this rather enthusiastic, full of questions Yorkshireman. If ever boffins invent a time machine, he, more than any other fly fisherman, living or dead, would be the one I'd beam up to for a day's nymphing. In this video I'm using his killer bug, search fishing, working upstream on one of the stretches he keeped on the Upper Avon. Maybe I'll be fishing in one of the very spots where he tested some of his patterns. Then we're off to that clearest of gin clear rivers, the Lambourne, to do a bit of sight fishing using his famous pheasant tail nymph. I pondered for a while whether to include this next one in this series on short streams. However, we have to include it if we're talking about Frank Sawyer. This, of course, is his famous killer bug. He had 5 flies which he pinned his faith on, and he said he could catch fish with them anywhere in the world. That was obviously his famous pheasant tail nymph. Then there was his very similar grey goose nymph. And then there was one similar to the grey goose, which was rather bigger and darker, called the SS, the Swedish special, which he used in northern Sweden. And then, of course, there was the killer bug, and then his bow tie buzzer. They were all quite strokes of genius in a way, because he used copper wire in one form or another in all the lot. He didn't use tyne, there wasn't one done with tyne thread. His killer bug never probably got as far across as to America, although it was christened by one of his American friends. But in this country, and to some extent on the continent, it has become quite famous. And lots of people that come down to fish the short streams, particularly the Upper Avon and the Middle Avon, where there's loads and loads of grayling, they always come armed to the teeth with killer bugs. Now, I'm going to tie this on a 14. It seems as though Sawyer used it in a variety of sizes. In fact, you probably don't know this, but he tied them in very large sizes and caught salmon with them. So, you know, here again, it's one hell of a fly. I'm using a size 14 Partridge H1A nymph hook. There's no indication in his book what hook brands he preferred and what style of hook. He just talks about them with the old numbering system. So I'm assuming he used something with a fairly long shank here now to get the sufficient lead copper wire wraps on. So first thing is obviously nip down the barb, and then he says in his instructions, we now prefer the red coloured copper wire. Apparently he tried all sorts of copper wire, but he says we now prefer the red coloured copper wire, and this has to be considerably thicker than the copper wire we use for the nymphs. Now this is about 3 times the thickness of the one he uses on his pheasant tail nymph. So I'm assuming this must be somewhere near. I'm just going to snap it off. And regarding the loading of the shank, his instructions are perfectly clear. It says start at the bend and now cover the entire shank evenly with the copper wire. And I'm going to shunt these up to one another now because I want to get as much of this copper wire on as I possibly can. So I'll just blast away, wind on, all the way up to the eye of the hook. When you just get short of the eye, there, say 1 turn short of the eye, come back over, and now make the double wrap, again making it very neat, crisp and even, so to speak. And of course, if you do a neat job and make them touch, you'll get more benefit because you'll get more weight into the fly. Just chicane it round the hook point so you don't click the hook point. Now what I do, I overlock that first starting point there. I lock over this with this. So lock over that. So we've gone up the shank and back down the shank in even turns, and now I'm just going to fret the starting point off. And now it says leave that wire dangling. And the great beauty is, of course, that this will not spring off because it's wire. Now we come to the body covering, and this is the famous Chadwick's 477. I would say the colour is a very pale shade of fawn with the merest blush of pink. And you can see it's 85% wool and 50% nylon. Run off about a good 18 inches, because you're going to make three laps of this, remember. Cut off. Last thing you want to do is run out. Or you could, if you're clever, you could use it from the card, but it's fiddly. So now, holding a little tag there, it says you start at the eye and lap on to make the catch. Once you've made the catch, keep tension on. Don't wind a loose fly, keep tension on. And now holding the tag down, when I get to about there, I just simply take that tag off. Now, what it says is you start at the eye and you wind all the way back, covering the wire evenly. And when you get to the bend, you wind back again. A lot of people, when they tie these, they build these up ovoid in shape, but not according to his instructions. When you get to the hook eye, you then come back down for the third cover. When you're at the bend, lock over with your copper wire, and he says tie it off with 4 turns of wire. 3, 4, and then cut both off. And I'll get my cod scissors, if I can get in, knocking the wire off. I'll just twist down that little cut end, and the scissors for cutting that off. Now, he doesn't say anything about sealing it with head cement in his book, but I think that because it's wire, I'm going to make a secure job of it, and you can either use head cement if you want. I'm just going to touch this with a fine touch of cyanoacrylate super glue to you and me. That's Sawyer's Killer Bug. Tied exactly as he recommends in Nymphs and the Trout. Now, what it does say is that this fly changes colour considerably when it's wet. So I'm going to dunk this in this handy glass of water. I'm going to show you what it means. So dunk that in and let it soak up some water, fairly instantaneous. And that's the colour when wet. A sort of dark, reddy, beigey, tannic colour. I don't know, it's a difficult colour to describe. It's almost a dark reddish brown colour. I reckon that could right well do some damage. It would be very interesting to actually use it on water where he fished it. If we can possibly get conditions right and find 1 or 2 pods of grayling, it'd be lovely to sort of do what the great man himself did. Brilliant. We'll give it a whirl. I'm now on one of the fabled stretches that Frank Sawyer looked after. This is in fact Bulford Mill, well, just above Bulford Mill. You can see actually Bulford Mill Cottage just behind me. That's the house where Frank Sawyer and his sisters were born. His sister Anne lives there today. I was speaking to her not 10 minutes ago. The water today is a little bit high due to this winter's rains. It's also a little bit turbid. I can still see the bottom, but I can't see it nearly as well as I wanted to. Also, the river is almost green out from bank to bank. I reckon it's just about due for its first weed cut. There are one or two nice clear channels I can see, and we have seen a pod of grayling higher up. There were about 5 or 6 grayling higher up. Unfortunately, there was a jackpike lurking somewhere near them. What I'm going to be doing today is both sight fishing to targeted fish and also a fair amount of prospecting, using, of course, the old killer bug. Remember, although Frank Sawyer is really famous for his upstream Netherhaven style to sighted fish, he did quite a lot of prospecting into blind spots where he couldn't see the fish and was very successful at it. And of course, he used to use a half greased up leader, so they had about, I don't know, 2 or 3 feet of ungreased leader point, and then a greased up part which he used to watch intently for the takes. I'm going to be doing much the same, except I'm going to use my old red minicon for my sight indicator. Looking at this, with 1 or 2 of the deepest channels, I think I might make a start here. What I've got to do is I've got to drop my fly, my bug, into these clear slots between the weed, and I'm going to home up onto this fish that we've spotted. We've seen a nice fish. Difficult to say how big he really is. All I could see really was a big tail waving about behind one of the weed fronds. I did see him move out once and I clearly saw his jaw open and close. He looks a nice fish, and he's somewhere just ahead of me in quite a large area of clear gravel. So what I've got to do is hopefully locate him. I think I know where he was. Drop my bug ahead of him, let it drift down. My minicon's nicely floating, fly line's nicely floating. All I've got to do now is quite simply keep in touch with my fly line as it's drifting down, so that I'm in a position to be able to tighten onto him if he takes. If I can't figure a bait fast enough, I'll simply do this. So the name of the game is just to keep in touch, take any kinks out, any coils, any squiggles on the surface, and let the bug trundle down, find its own depth. This is not fishing with a bobber or a buoyant strike indicator. All this is just a red minicon, a red braid sleeve at the end of my fly line. I may get a fish in one of these slots down here, but I'm going for this targeted fish up there. I'm probably somewhere near him now. That's coming over. Yes, there's a fish. I don't know what it is. Feels reasonable. Going upstream, taking line again. Go and run all this off me and then I can get you on the reel. Go on, stay upstream. Don't you come down here. It's got some ranunculus around him. Yeah, it's the fish I saw. Right. Go on. You get running. You've got the current to fight as well as me. The only trouble is, of course, that this river's just full of ranunculus. It's still going. Nowhere near got the steam out of this. And don't you go into those weeds. I thought this fly would work, the old bug. Well done, Frank Sawyer. Thank you very much, sir. Yeah, this is the fish. This is the fish I saw. I knew this fish were feeding. I could see him aggressively going side to side. That was a nice run you gave me there, pal. The bad news is a rainbow. Would you believe it? We are under instructions to remove any rainbows that are caught today, so I'm sorry, Paul, you're for the chop. They are apparently escapees from a trout farm upstream somewhere. However, that said, he's certainly pulling my string. Come. Mind you, at this stage, a lot of people lose fish. Not to say that I'm going to land this fish, but these dying moments are when you've just got to keep your cool and not panic. Just keep weight on. Try if you can to get the fish, to coax the fish to go upstream of you. At the moment it's trying to dig in behind those fronds of ranunculus. Of course, it's always more difficult to pump a fish back upstream towards you than it is to bring a fish downstream. And that's why I want this boy to go upstream. Come yourself out, that's it. That's it, now go on, swim upstream. Go on. Come on. Go on. Okay, try this bank then if you want. See, I've only a £2 point on, so I can't really lay into it. And you might say to yourself, why the hell fish with a £2 point when you fish like this in the water? Well, the reason is that if you want a bug to sink fast, thin mono sinks a lot faster than thick mono. So, although a soya bug's fairly heavy, it's not so heavy. And you want it to get down. And the proof of the pudding is that it's stuck in this fish's jaw. So it was doing its job. However, the battle's not over yet. And in this weedy river, there's no knowing what might happen. He's got a fair bit of stamina, so he's been in the river a fair while. He's not fresh out of a stock pond, ain't this lad? And I'm working him into my own bank now. Just see if I can get my rod underneath that frond of weed. That's better. It's digging deep. Come on, up to the surface. Come on, up. Ah, he's not beat yet. That's better. I'll stay down of you all the time. That's better. That's better. Over you come. And in. Whoa. Slab. Whew. Ha! A £2 point. I'm getting on for 3, I would say. Stocky, you see, trout farm job. But it's a big fish to land on light tackle. Right, well, after that rude interruption by that big silly rainbow, we'll get ourselves organised. There's one or two nice looking bits tight into my own bank here. There's like a row of weed sort of straight down the 2/3 position down the river. From the weed to the bank is clear gravel, and that looks good enough to prospect with the same fly, the old killer bug. It worked once. It doesn't take much to deceive a rainbow, of course, but let's see if we can do the same and get a brownie or two and maybe a grayling up this clear run. This is my own concoction of Fuller's Earth, fairy liquid and glycerine. The old Fuller's Earth is a good carrier medium for your super degreasant fairy liquid, or any washing up liquid. Is a very excellent detergent, very good degreaser. So, and then what I do when I've applied the stuff, you can also use, there's proprietary brands as well. You can use, there's some Orvis mud, that's the same stuff. What I do then, I test it, I lay it on the water, and a good idea then is to, with some wetted hands, just spread it along. and then I always check that the whole lot's sinking. And then what I do, get some floatant. This high float's good stuff. Now you don't need to touch this. What I do, I just let the leader stream against my side to keep a bit of tension on, and just squeeze this on. Once you've got a dollop on, keep your hands off it. This is very, very sticky, viscous stuff. Back in your pocket, and now you're in business. Now that's going to sink, and that's going to float. Voila. Drop it in again. Minicon floats, leader sinks. And that's perfect for seeing the stab of a take. You may get a stab and it may be weed, but with this style of fishing you hit everything. One or two short range exploratory casts first of all, up by the bowl of that little willow. Yes, and there's a fish straight away. I must have literally, there's a brown. I must have literally dropped it in his mouth. Well, hey, yes, you should be in a circus, pal. Well, we'll net him. Wet my hands. That was a bit instantaneous. The old killer bug's working a treat. Hold still while I just slip it out. And away he goes. I knew there'd be a fish up this side here. It's a bit of clear gravel with weed nearby so they can dive in for cover. Where I'm fishing at the moment is probably slightly less deep than where I'm stood. It's probably about knee depth. So this fly is not quite getting down, but it's certainly in the lower water column. And these fish are quite active. If it comes down within 6 inches of them, they'll raise up and take it. Fish have just risen ahead of me, so there's obviously a few fish up this little run here. Of course, Frank's killer bug, initially, his concept was to design something that was quite a quick tie to imitate freshwater shrimps. And of course it does a good job of imitating freshwater shrimp, but he later realised that it copies a whole lot of insect larvae, the insect nymphs. And as Dave Whitlock once said to me about his red fox squirrel nymph, it's food, purely and simply food. And if fish see something that drifts past them that looks edible, they ain't going to refuse it. Fish have to forage actively all day long to eat. Weed now and again is making the minicon tick, but there's a difference between a weed take and a fish take. When a fish takes it, the minicon is really animated, like that. Ah, off. There's no mistaking when a fish takes, it stabs. It doesn't just tick or hold back, it moves. There's no point in letting it trail right past me. That's being fished. It's this constant movement ahead of you. So many people fail with this kind of fishing because they stay rooted. What you've got to do is show your fly to as many fish as possible, hoping that one of them's going to slip up. I can see ahead of me some what looks like blonde gravel, knowing how trout and grayling love to lie on clear gravel. So I'll just move up that little bit faster. Any little slight kinks in the line I'm not too bothered about, as long as I can straighten them out when I strike and they don't upset the drift of the bug. It's okay. What you don't want is loads and loads of squiggles as though you've been throwing a slack line cast. mayfly hatching there. Just have to get onto line strip. It's just speeding up that little bit just there. Must stay in contact. If you find like there that it's flowing a little bit fast and you can't figure it out fast enough, then use the strip method. Just take line in, drop it on the water surface, or loop it. If I loop, you see, I just come through my trigger finger, just loop it, and then release your loops as you false cast. And out they go. Do that again. If you take them in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then they go off 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If you can't loop and you just drop it on the water, nothing wrong with that. Perfectly acceptable. The main thing is to watch that and control that. But if you do that, look at all this lot trailing behind me. It's going to hang up in ranunculus flower heads or even just trailing on the surface. What I've got to do then, I've got to pick all that back up. So I've got to work now with my line hand, dragging this upstream. And it's just all extra effort. Wind's getting up. So if you can coil and drop it in your hand like that, so much the better. I'll just have a couple of throws off my wrong shoulder over here. Try this far bank down by this long row of weeds. That's had no one down that bank at all. As long as the bug will travel without getting hung up. Just need to get over another. Yes. Ah, that's what's happened. The fish are over there. Small timerless. Nicely wetted hands. Come on, Sonny Jim. There the fish rose in my swim. It wasn't all that far ahead of me, probably 2 rod lengths. So you've got to be able to work off your right or left shoulder. That's another essential skill. Pick off and be able to deliver off your wrong shoulder. And throw a reasonable length of line. Oof, wow, that took it immediately, landed. That's a little bit too far over to my left. Straight onto ranunculus. I've missed the slot with that one. Wind's just got up a tad. I'll pick off and recast. There's a 5 foot slot here, 5-6 foot slot here, which I've got to hit. Definitely worth pursuing is this slot. Now that I'm over to it, I can see that it's relatively clear of weed. The bottom's quite clean. So I can stalk up here. Oh, that did look like a fish. That last fish hit the bug as it was sinking, and I just saw the minicon flick. Another good explosion below me. Mind you, if they've got their eyes on ascending mayfly nymphs, maybe they'll lose a bit of interest in this killer bug. Well, I wouldn't have thought so, but it's just a possibility. I just heard 4 fish in a short space of time rising quite positively to the surface. making splashy rises, though they've taken something aggressively. Yes. And this is a grayling. I've just seen him go past me. Of course, these fish at one time, grayling, in the what I like to think of the bad old days, they were looked upon as vermin, and they tried actively to remove these from trout streams. And it's only in recent years that grayling have become really well accepted. In fact, a lot of anglers prefer to fish for grayling rather than trout. I'm one of them. I think grayling are a lovely sporting fish. And when you get them in a picky mood, that's ranunculus. When you get them in a picky mood, I often call it trout with O levels and grayling with A levels, because sometimes when grayling are in that way out to dry fly, they are the very devil to fool. Right, just move up a little bit now. Yes. That one took late. Another small grayling. The Avon is noted for its grayling stocks, but Frank, in his book, in The Nymph and the Trout, he talks about grayling in the Upper Avon. The biggest he ever caught weighed exactly 3 pounds. But he's also heard of, or is reported in his book, that one of their members had won I think it's either £3.6 or £3.4 today. That is a monster. Maybe a shorter cast. Very, very simple is upstream nymphing. It's an essential skill. Everybody who fishes rivers must have it. It's a bit like dry fly fishing. You cast the head of the fish. You have to do this little mental calculation of how deep are the fish lying, the speed of the current, and the descent rate of your nymph. Once you've done that, with a high floating, if you want to call it a strike indicator, it's easy. And there's a fish. Small grayling. Come on, mate. And old Frank's killer bug's done it again. Lovely sail of a fin. In you go. Well, that's my day over at Bulford Mill. And, you know, I've had quite a good day, really. It's been a case of win a few, lose a few. Had that big unexpected rainbow. I've had a few grayling, the odd small brownie. It's really not about that, though. Really, what I wanted to do was to come and fish this famous water, the water that one of my all-time heroes keepered and actually fished. You never know, I may have had my feet in the very footprint marks where he stood all those years ago. And of course, I've met his sister, his youngest sister, which was an absolute bonus for me. The wind's got up now. I'm going to leave it at this. I don't want to spoil the day. It's been absolutely super. So I'm going to call it a draw. No one would ever come down and fish on the chalk streams without a few Sawyer's pheasant tails. In fact, my own box, I've got a nice little row of probably a dozen there and an 18. Sawyer's pheasant tail nymph has become rightly famous throughout the entire fly fishing world. It and its derivatives. I mean, it's tied in large sizes for reservoirs, but in actual fact, it's become the universal fly. It covers lots and lots of natural insects. Originally, Frank tied it to copy the ephemeropterans, the free-swimming or the agile darting nymphs, such as the olives and the spurwings. well, the olives actually, the spur wings are used as the grey goose. The fly itself is very simple to tie, but a lot of people don't make such a good job of it. So we're going to do one. I'm going to show you the proper way to tie them. He uses two basic materials, and two only, and that's herl from a centre tail feather of a cock pheasant and fine red coloured copper transformer wire. What he does say, however, and this you must take note of, he says that the wire he uses is a little thicker than a human hair. So you don't want this thick stuff. If you get thick wire, you won't get a neat nymph. It won't have a nice tapered abdomen. And I've also got some here that's not much thicker, but this is self-coloured. So what you want to look for is the stuff that's red lacquered. Also, when you get your pheasant tail fibres, when you get your pheasant centre tails, look at the length of that fibre. That fibre length there is critical because you're going to do a double wrap, a double lap as he calls it, for the thorax. I've measured this, and if I hold my ruler up here, that fibre length is 2.5 inches. I've been very lucky to find a centre tail with ultra long fibres. It's 2.5 inches, a full 2.5, and you need it. It'll almost be used up. So go for as long fibred feather as you can possibly find. We'll make a start now. The hook I'm using is a size 18 partridge H1A hook firming device. Knock the barb down first of all. I'm going to take off, well, don't skimp on the wire. Worst thing that can happen is using up before you get to the end. So I'm going to take off about 18 inches. And you'll see it's not very strong when I break it. So you will have to be careful. What you've got to do is you've got to remember to start at the bend. Not at the eye, start at the bend. That's what Sawyer says. Catch on your wire and then cover the shank in even turns. It doesn't say whether it's even touching turns, it just says even, cover the shank evenly, I think is his exact words. So you wind away. It's an absolute master stroke, is this fly. It just uses two materials, and the wire, in effect, is your tying thread all the way through. So you wind away to a position where you want the pronounced hump to be. So you build the wire up and make this nice even hump, sort of oval shaped. And of course the wire is also the weight, so you get time medium, undercolour and weight all in one go. Probably just a little bit more in the centre where I'm a bit low, there. You wind the wire now, again in even turns, all the way now to the bend. And I'm going to still hold that tag end. And what I do when I get down to there, with this piece, the travelling piece, I'm going to lock over this piece. So come down, come along, that last turn locks over it. And that effectively traps it down, and then I just tweak that off. Now you come to your pheasant tail, and it says 4 fibres. Just separate your 4 fibres from the centre stalk. If you hold them out at right angles, like that, and tweak them off, you should find that the tips are all neatly in line. And then if they're not in line, just find the one that's lagging and just pull it forward. There's 2 there, so just pull those 2 forward. Having got your 4 fibres nicely even, just hold the tips. What I do, I just stroke up the flow a little bit, lift the nap. Now, what Sawyer says is that on his nymphs, he likes the tails to project only about 1/8 of an inch. I find it difficult to hold these 1/8 of an inch tips. You'll find that you'll pull them out, and it's a pest, is that. So what I do is this. Hold the wire up, get hold of more than an eighth. I hold about almost 3/4. And trap with those 2 fingers. And now look, I'm able to lock them down on top of the shank right where I want them. Right on top of the shank, right at the end of the shank. So there's my tails, very, very long. Now what I do, I simply draw them through, hold all the 4 butts, draw them through until you've got your tails 1/8 of an inch long. Come with 1 more turn on top. Tails are now perfectly in line with the hook shank and nicely spread under tension of the wire. And now he says, wrap the remaining hurl round the wire. So you just twist these, twist and twist and twist until they go around the copper wire. Keeping the wire under tension all the time, otherwise your tails will lose their nice alignment. Now he says, wind this on, wind the hurl on evenly to produce a nice, even, smooth, and you should have a tapering body. You wind along, look how it's using the hurl up. You go all the way along, go over the thoracic hump, and now he says, separate the hurls from the wire. They'll fly apart, so make 1 turn there to lock them. And now, his instructions are, take the wire now back to behind the thoracic hump. And he doesn't say whether it's in several turns or 1 turn. I think his intention is to take it back in 1 fell swoop. So I go back there and drop the wire. Then he says, take the remaining hurls back and lock down. And then he says, take the hurls forward again for the 2nd lap. But what he doesn't say is, do you take the wire forward first or afterwards? I think he implies that you take the wire from the back of the thorax, straight forward in 1 go, hook under the eye. Now bring the hurls forward and lock down again for the last time. Your thorax is a double layer of the hurls. One's back and one's forward. I'll take my scissors and I'll just nearly cut off that waist. And then I'm going to use this for finishing off. And Frank, being a practical countryman, I'm sure he wouldn't have minded the odd dab of super glue. I do the old trick of just anointing a little bit of the wire. Just run this down the wire and make about 1 inch of it just moist with super glue. And then finish with your 6 turns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now a bit more weight on the wire and it breaks off. Done. That's the nymph. Just 1 place you've got to watch, and that's catching down your wire when you tie your tails in. Otherwise, it's dead easy. I'm on the Lambone today, and I'm almost salivating with anticipation and excitement. This little stream, I've wanted to fish all my life. This is a true chalk stream, no doubt about it. Unlike the Avon, which comes off green sand, this is off pure chalk. It's absolutely gin clear. It's so clear, it looks to me as though you could take a glassful of it and drink it. I wouldn't recommend that you did that, but it looks that clear. Now, down below me, we've got an area of water with some nice ranunculus beds dotted about on the stream. It looks very, very interesting down there. This morning we're going up here. Up here the river is slightly different character and it's far, far more flat and placid. We're choosing to come up here purposely because what we want to do is show you some sight fishing with small Sawyer's nymphs. And this is the area we're going to work up. All that flat stuff above this little bit of a break where you see the white ranunculus flowers, we're going to work up all that. We did a little recce earlier, sort of a pashy style, and we've seen several nice trout and grayling. In fact, there were 1 or 2 trout that looked to be around about the pound mark, and certainly grayling around the pound mark. This is extreme chalk stream fishing because the fish have very little cover. They're lying in little depressions in the riverbed, usually with the noses tucked up behind a little dark stone on the bottom or a little bit of obstruction. Anywhere where they feel as though they're safe. You see this fringe on the bank side? That hasn't been, there's a path here that's been trimmed, and this is typical of chalk streams. They leave this little fringe here so we anglers can get down behind it. So that's our cover. That's to keep us out of the fish's sight. So let's move up here and do a bit of Indian style fishing. This particular stream is absolutely gin clear, so trying to keep as low as possible on the bank is absolutely paramount. The upward field of vision of a trout is an inverted cone of approximately 97 degrees. The circular area at the surface is the trout's window. However, because of light refraction, objects below 10 degrees can't be seen, and the image is distorted, except for objects vertically above. As you can see from the diagram, the deeper the trout lies, the larger the window. So remember, a trout near the surface has less chance of seeing you, the opposite of what you'd expect. Beyond the edge of the window, the water surface reflects the bed of the river or lake as a true mirror. You can clearly see the weed bed here and its reflection in the mirror. Of course, both window and mirror are destroyed if the surface of the water is ruffled in any way. That's why we fly fishers can get quite near trout in riffles. I can see 2 grayling ahead of it, and I've got my little pheasant tail on. I'm just simply watching the reaction of the fish. I've got it clearly in view. I can't see my nymph at all. Ideally, of course, you try to work yourself into a position where you can see the actual nymph sinking. But if you can't spot it, then get your eyes back on the fish. I'm allowing the nymph to drift over the fish and hoping that one of them, I see it come out of its lie, open and close its mouth in a snapping action, and that for me will be enough for me to lift onto it. This sight fishing, as with all nymphing, he definitely turned and had a look at it. It's all a question, particularly with grayling, it's all a question of getting it down to their depth and absolutely on their lie. You'll see a positive indication when he intercepts, because you'll see him suddenly whip round or surge to one side. He'll lift in the water column, you'll see him come head up, mouth agape, and he'll take the fly. It's moved after a natural, wasn't at me. Now he's moved off lie, which probably means he's slightly nervous. Seen my rod moving about. He's dropping back now. He's dropped downstream considerably from his lie. But he doesn't seem alarmed. It's just, there's no increase in tail beat. He's just shifted position. He's now lying smack dab in front of that weed bed. He took, and I was just a little bit too early on him then. So maybe he's just got over his resting period and started looking for... Got him. I just saw him turn round and just flash his mouth. Come on, sunshine. Whoops. Long release. Well, that was a sight to take with that. I didn't see the nymph, didn't see the pheasant tail, but I saw the fish definitely move. He came right off station, dropped back and turned and opened his mouth, and I tightened. And that's basically what you do with sight fishing. If you can't see your nymph, I mean, Sawyer used to talk about being able to see the nymph fall through the water. Probably have better eyesight than me. Generally speaking, when your nymph plops in, you get a little receding rings. This is what I find anyway. In pellucid clear water that's completely flat like this, when your nymph plops in, the actual action of your nymph going in causes a tiny ripple. And that tiny ripple, for that instant, you lose sight of your nymph dropping down through the water column. You're only looking at something that's like 3/16 of an inch long, so you can't see it. So what you do, stop watching where you fly, stop worrying about your fly, look at your target. And that target told me all. It came straight back and grabbed it. And you're in. And it's fairly easy then, all you do is lift. Proof of the pudding was in the eating. He got off, but it doesn't matter. This, of course, is extreme short stream fishing because, unlike where Sawyer fished, where there was a lot of ranunculus cover, I've virtually got a desert in front of me. It's very little cover for the fish. If I make any bad cast here, any splashy delivery, these fish are just going to spook. And even if I don't visibly spook them, I'll give them a little bit of time to recover. I'm going to go past them now. That a fish made a really good rise up there. So I'm going to go past these fish. Try to keep out of the sight, keeping behind this fringe, and go up for that fish that just rose. Right, now ahead of me, I'm pretty sure I've got a trout in view. I can't tell for sure, he's just a grey ghost on the bottom. I think he's a trout. I'll just go for him and just drop this ahead and see what his reactions are. Now I'm watching that fish quite intently. And I'm casting it way ahead of him now, letting it drift down, taking in line by figure of 8. I'm not getting any problems with drag because this is running all at one linear speed. Just having to drop my rod a little bit on my back cast because I've got some trees immediately behind my right shoulder. Now he may be more interested if I just move it slightly, just slightly induce it as it gets down to his level. Yes, he moved to it. He moved to the speed up of the fly. But didn't take it, didn't open his mouth, he just chased. Now he moved off lie then. I thought he spooked, but he's gone back to it. Gone straight back to his lie. What is important with all aspects of bank fishing, of course, is that you never know which bank you're going to be on, and if it's the wrong bank for you, for your casting hand, it's important that you can cast what I call over the wrong shoulder. So that if you have trees behind you, catching you with a vertical cast, you can drop your rod to a flatter elevation, drop it down to 3 o'clock almost. And that's also another essential skill. And what you do when you come off the wrong shoulder is you keep your hand and your thumb facing in the direction that you're going to cast. You don't turn your hand and do what some people do, like that. Keep your thumb has to be facing in the direction that your cast is going. So you come off your wrong shoulder, bring the rod over your wrong shoulder. What I do, I just drop my shoulder, and you can make casts almost as far as I can, going over my correct shoulder. Well, he showed promise to start with, and now he's completely gone off the take. There's one about 3 yards upstream of this one and further over, and he's chasing it. He chased it right down. Now he's more interested, is that fella. He's chasing again, but didn't take. He's definitely interested. See if he'll come out from behind this time. I thought he took me then. He definitely made a real... Yes, I thought he'd take me. There's a nice fish. Nice little speckled brownie. Probably, it's a good, it'll be a good 3/4 pound will this when you get him out. I can assure you he's fatter than he looks. I'll just have to clear away through this fringe just so I can dip my net down. And there's a fish rising. In you come. I need to wet my hands because they're really hot and sticky on my hands and don't get nettled in the process. Get a nice chilled hand. Slip the fly out. Whoops. A prettily marked fish, very silvery. He's well over ½ pound. He's probably 10 ounces, that fish. Right, in he goes. Hold him head up into the current. Here he goes. There you are. There's the fly that did the trick. Slip it out. Frank Sawyer's pheasant tail nymph. Well, that's my day on the Lambourne almost over. I'm going to round it off with probably an hour's dry fly fishing up this run. We've been nymph fishing to sighted fish, and we've had a few, and we've pricked a few, and we've spooked quite a lot more than we've landed. But it's been great fun. Remember, trout sees the world through a 97-degree cone. The deeper its line, the bigger that cone is where it meets the surface, and the higher it's sitting, the smaller that cone is. And then beyond the cone, they see the bottom mirrored. So it's the window that's important, and you've got to be below the refraction of that window. So keep yourself down, keep concealed behind these fringes that the keepers leave, or any bush on the bank. Keep yourself low, that's the key word. Remember also, wear drab clothing. You can get away with 1 or 2 movements if you've got drab clothing, but if you've got a white shirt or a pink shirt, he's just going to flee straight out of the run and you're going to have no chance at all. Also, avoid rod flash. Avoid a lot of false casting. So if you do that and you've got good artificials, find tippets. I've been fishing 1.7 pound tippets today. Find tippets, make good presentations, assume the depth, try to work out the depth at where the fish are lying. I know it's difficult on gin clear streams, and I got surprised today. Then you've got to make a little bit of a calculation how far ahead of that fish you have to pitch your nymph. So it's a little bit of a calculation where the fish is, where the nymph is to be pitched, the speed of flow, and if you work all that out and make a good presentation and then make good line control so that the nymph doesn't drag, just let it trundle along, watch the fish then. If you see it make any movement as your nymph's coming past it where you assume it to be, if you see the fish come out and go, make this sudden gulp like that, see the white of its mouth, tighten, or you see him turn back and grab, tighten, set the hook. Chances are is at your nymph. So that's about it. I'm going to have a bit of dry fly fishing now. You can obviously catch fish without any knowledge of entomology whatsoever, but to be consistently successful, particularly when after wild browns and grayling, having some understanding of aquatic insects is advantageous. An essential skill, if you like. You don't have to take a degree course. All you need is an interest, an inquiring mind, a good pair of eyes and a few good reference books. Then spend a bit of time doing some stone turning or kick sampling. You don't need to delve to species level. I don't. Just concern yourself with orders and families. That'll give you a body shape, a silhouette, the very thing which fish recognise and key onto. Freshwater shrimps are a preferred food for trout and grayling, and in alkaline waters such as our English chalk streams, they can be present in truly biblical numbers, which is why my masterclass leaded shrimp works so well. But for those deep hatch pools with powerful swirling currents, something far heavier is required. So the trick here is to ballast the hook with those clever little tungsten sleeves. Tungsten, as we know, is twice as heavy as lead, so you get all the weight you need without spoiling the outline of the shrimp. But let's first go down to the river and do a bit of kick sampling. See what we can turn up from this stretch of the Middle Avon. I'm going to do some bug hunting now. It's time to get the old net going. What I'm looking for in particular are the big mayfly nymphs, the nymphs of the green drake, these things that are about 1.25 inches long. I'm not on the main river, this is just a carrier. The river proper is down there about 70 yards just below me. Why I've come on this little carrier is because there's talk of the floods last year washing a lot of the mayfly nymphs away. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But what I do know for sure is that yesterday mayfly were coming off here in the droves, so I know I'm expecting to find plenty of mayfly nymphs in here. There'll be other things as well. There'll be baetis nymphs, there's got to be shrimp by the million, there's probably going to be case caddis and free-living caddis. We're going to use the same old drill, wife's net curtain between two brush poles. So there's a clear slot here, silt and marl, between those two weed beds. So I'm just going to slip myself in. It's deeper than it looks because it's so clear. So same drill, netting below you, current coming from behind. I'm sure to find loads down here. There's probably a million shrimp as well as mayfly nymphs. So I'll just gently ease the bottom up with my toe of my wader and progress along. And I can see already there's stuff getting washed in. And now I'll get my hands down and lift it out. Oh, what a haul. There's loads. It's like a soup in here. I've even got some fish. Mayfly nymphs by the dozen. This is some haul, is this? Just look at these big things. Mayfly nymph. Mayfly nymph. Now look at the size of this. Beauty. That is a full body length of 1.5 inches. With tails and antenna, I would say you're getting near 1 3/4 there. Bob that in the tray. Just look at this collection of mayfly nymphs. Can you see these here with the really dark wing buds like that fella? That's ripe, is that? That'll be hatching today. And look at this. Look at the size of this one. Just look at the size of that. It's a monster. I mean, that body is from its tail to its head. Disregarding its tail, its 3 tails. That's 1.25 inches. It's 1 3/8 inches long, is that? It's huge. Those are its gills there, over the back. Look at the distinct dorsal markings, those 3 pairs of markings. And look at the distinct tails. 3 tails, that tells you it's a mayfly. Now, what I want to show you is the distinct difference in size between a male and a female nymph. There's an adult female, huge. Now, here by comparison, that's an almost mature male nymph. And you can see the difference. One's only about 3/4 the size of the other. We've also got a fairly early instar nymph, this little one here. That's a mayfly nymph also. That'll be coming off next year. They've a 2-year life cycle, so this little one here, that's going to be as big as these next year. I'm going to drop in here now my 2 nymphs, my jointed ephemeras, and you'll see that although they've had the tail chewed off, they're not a million miles from being the correct size. And if I wrangle one of these round into position, you can see that it's not too big. Okay, I'm a bit out with colour. They need to be creamier, but fish still slam them. So what I've done, I've put the little gills on the top there to represent the gills on the nymph itself. The main thing is to get the size right. If you can get the size right and the general coloration, it's good enough for a fish. These are really distinctly cream. And if I turn this one over here, this big one, see if I can just coax it to tip over. Look how cream the belly side on that is. Come on, roll over. Look how cream the belly side is. Almost ivory cream. Beautiful creature. I found 3 more families of mayfly nymph. Here we've got a canis. We've got a batis nymph and a blue-winged olive nymph. Too small for you to see at that range. We've got a canis there. These are laboured swimmers, these are post swimmers. Can you see the dark shields over the front part of his abdomen? There's like 2 dark plates. This is our biggest species of canis. Most fly fishers think canis are minute. This is probably Canis robusta, our largest species. Here's a blue-winged olive nymph. Look at its speckled legs and tails and narrow waist. Both these nymphs are what they call sprawlers. And there's a batis nymph here that could be a pale watery. It's a little agile dart. Completely different shape to the blue-winged olive. So there's the blue-winged olive with his cocked up tail, and there's a batis at the side of it. Oh look, This is unusual. Here's a batis that's just hatched out on net. Here's a case caddis. Note the smooth curved case. I know he's alive in there. Here he comes, just poking his head out now. Put that in there with the caddis. They build these portable shelters, and obviously they use whatever material is there at hand. So you can see that on these they've got these little white speckles, and that's because they've been picking minute bits of chalk up. So the whole shelter is a mixture of chalk and other bits of gravel, and they're smooth sheltered types. And I think it's the species is the Welshman's button, but I'm not all that sure, because the identification of caddis larvae is quite difficult. To be really accurate, you've got to use the scientific keys. But actually, I do think these are Welshman's buttons. There we've got a huge case, and you can see that it's changed the construction halfway along. We've got a smooth part and a very rough, knobbly part with quite large bits of gravel. Probably one of the limnophilids, maybe a caper or a cinnamon. There's a big hydropsyche. There's another one. And another one. I like that interview. Look how olive they are. Much more olive than the ones we have in the Yore and the Wharf. There's a nice, quite a light olive in fact. You can see the distinctive two tail filaments there. That tells you it's a hydropsyche larva. Gills on the underside. Americans call them net spinners or net builders. They don't make a case like the case ones. They're free living. And they make a shelter out of bits of detritus. And they actually, this is strange as this, but they actually make a small net. They spin a net at the mouth of the shelter, and they use it for actually trapping their prey. They're highly predatory. They've got very, very strong mouth parts, biting mouth parts. These feed on very early instar nymphs, tiny larvae, water fleas, midge larvae and the like. Anything that's small, animal and edible that stumbles into their net, they devour them. There's actually that many shrimp in here. I'd be all day picking them out, but there's a nice one. That's more or less the normal colour. There's the one that people call a pink shrimp. He's in fact, you can see he's slightly orange in colour. I'm not quite sure why one shrimp should be this very dark colour and another one distinctly pale and almost orangey in cast. It could be that it's shed its skin, and that's the new exoskeleton that's not hardened and got its dark pigmentation. A bit like a soft-shelled crab. Frank Sawyer obviously intended his killer bug to copy these dark ones, not the pinky orange ones, and his famous Chadwick's 477, when wet, copies these dark ones quite accurately. Here I've got a little fry bullhead, about 1.5 inches long. Put that in there. And your little miller's thumbs, or skull pins if you're an American. You can see the large pectoral fins. You can also see its very distinct large wedge-shaped head. And look at the nice barrings all down its side. So there's a couple of little bullheads, and they'll grow to about 3.5 inches long maximum. So right, let's summarise, starting with the Ephemeroptera. All the mayfly order of insects have 3 tails in the nymphal form. There is one exception, but that's not a UK species anyway. The biggest mayfly nymph is the green drake. Unmistakable, it's huge, up to 1.3 inches long. Creamy or creamy olive with very distinct gills on the top of its abdomen. They will hatch into the famous mayfly or green drake. The Batis group of nymphs are dead easy to identify, even at a glance. Look at the slim, streamlined shape, a bit like a slim Indian club. If you look closely, you'll be able to see tiny petal-shaped gills down each side of the abdomen, a sure sign of a Batis. These are agile nymphs, which swim in short, fast spurts. These hatch into the well-known olives, such as large dark olives, medium olives, pale wateries, spur wings and iron blues. Blue-winged olive nymphs are also very easy to identify. Look where the abdomen joins the thorax. Note that there's a quite distinct waist here. Look how fat and sturdy they are, and notice the well-speckled tails and legs. These nymphs have a common habit of cocking their abdomens vertically. They're quite poor swimmers, preferring to crawl about instead. They crawl about on the moss and stones of the river bed. Obviously they hatch into the blue-winged olive or BWO. Canis nymphs are also quite sturdy. Most are small to absolutely minute, but at least one UK species is quite large, and I think this is it. I'm pretty sure this is Canis robusta. The thing which clinches all the Canis species are the two shield-like plates, which covers some of the top part of the abdomen. This is another poor swimmer. And as I'm sure you'll know, these hatch into the well-known angler's curse. Let's look now at caddis or sedges, the Trichoptera. Caddis larvae fall into two distinct groups, the free-living types and the potable case bearers. Here's one of the free-living types, the very common hydrocycle larva. Look straight away at its tail end. If it has two very distinct V-like projections, each with a little brush at the end, it's a safe bet you're looking at one of the hydrocycles. Notice also the very dark thoracic plates, black almost, and the head also. Americans call them net spinners. They spin a small net in front of their loose shelters for trapping their prey. This will eventually hatch into a grey or speckled sedge. Here's a case caddis. This species uses fine sand and chalk particles for constructing its case, which is slightly curved. I think this will hatch into Welshman's button, a caddis with quite plain dark chestnut brown wings and golden brown legs. But I'm not sure. Identifying caddis from their larvae is very tricky. This huge case is probably made by one of the limnophilic group of caddis flies. Probably the caper or large cinnamon sedge. Notice how it's changed its construction halfway along from fairly smooth to rough and knobbly. And lastly, a summary of crustaceans and fish, or amphipoda and perciformes if you want to get technical. Freshwater shrimps should present no problem at all with identification. Notice how they hold a distinct curve shape when at rest and almost straighten out when swimming, which they do on the sides. Most are olive grey or olive brown in colour. Some are quite dark, as this one, but you'll find some which are a distinct pale orange. They can reach almost 3/4 of an inch in length, but we usually find them about 1/2 an inch long, or even smaller. Here's a bullhead or miller's thumb, or sculpin if you're American. Fillet steak for trout, they love them. Look at its general shape, large conical head, totally out of proportion to its body, and large fant pectoral fins, all diagnostic of the bullhead. Their bodies are usually mottled or barred for camouflage. They're nocturnal bottom dwellers and hide away under rocks and stones during the day. Now, for nymph fishing, it's basically the same leader that I use for my small dries. It's 7.5 feet, tapered down to 3 pound breaking strain at the tip, at the point. And now I would put on probably 2.5 or 3 or even 3.5 feet of 2 pound mono, 2 to 2.5 pound mono, depending on conditions. Rarely would I go down to something like 1.5 pound, but you could do in really extreme low water and very clear conditions. Probably on the clear chalk streams, you may occasionally have to go down to 1.5 pound tippet. So that's it. It's as simple as that. This is a hatch pool, and they're a fairly regular feature on chalk streams. I'm not getting too near the edge because there's fish just over this wall here. Now, these hatch pools, as you can see, they're man-constructed, and the idea was that in the olden days they dropped boards in to form a dam to stop the river flow, and the principle was to flood the water meadows, these outlying meadows. They did that in winter, and in spring they take the boards out and let the river run away again. And of course the surrounding fields all drained away, and what was left was a layer of alluvial silt, rich silt. And it was in fact a very early form of fertiliser, and obviously the grass grew lush and rich through this new silt, and then they put the stock on to graze. So it was a form of providing good early nutrition for their stock. Now this particular hatch pool, you can see with this little building here, this was in fact a turbine house, a very early form of hydroelectric power. Obviously long since unused, but a very attractive feature. And this is quite a ferocious hatch pool. The flow that's rushing through the other side of the turbine house, gravel has been washed up on the downstream side, so the pudding basin lower edge, if you like, is all gravelled up, and there ranunculus has taken root, so you get this apron of ranunculus. In the centre the flow's too fast for ranunculus to take hold, so you get this lovely hard gravel bottom. And all hatch pools hold stocks of fish, usually some very big fish too. Anyway, I'm going to start now. I'm going to just drop back a touch. I'm going to fish up this wall side. To fish these hatch pools, I think, is another essential skill, because a lot of people are a bit mystified by hatch pools. They don't know how to tackle them. What I've got on is a really heavy shrimp pattern. Check my back cast that I've room. These aren't going to help me here. And I'm going to start off up this wall side. If I go out into the main stream, even this heavy bug's going to have no chance of finding depth. So I'm just going to present this down the wall side. And there's a fish. So that was first cast. There must have been a fella down there hooking it on for me. What it is, there's a little gravel bar. We came spotting them the other day, and there's a lot of fish lying on this gravel bar. Come on, sunshine. There we go. Just wet my hands. And I'll slip him back. There he goes. Fishing these hatch pools is very interesting. There's so many vagaries of the current. One second they're coming towards you, another second there's a boil in the water and upwelling, and they go the other direction. So let's see if we can get another one down by this wall side. I want to deliver my nymph just up into where I can see that golden gravel, because that's where the fish are lying. Just drop it in ahead of me, right in the pickle barrel. Right, it's blowing towards the wall side now. It's coming straight across to the wall side. It's down by the wall side. I'm taking in slack. That could have been a fish, but I don't think it was. The trick, of course, is to get the nymph, in this case a shrimp, as deep as you can. Deep on the bottom. Line's coming back towards me now, so I'm just taking in the slack, running it down this wall side. When they take quite ferociously. There's no kidding, no mistaking. And that's tending now to go back downstream. It's just starting to form a back eddy. There's a fish. This is better. It may not be a monster. They're powerful, are these Avon fish. It's fighting deep. He's going out into main flow. There he goes. Get him on the reel. He's ready for net now, I think, almost. Oh, it's a tidy fish. He might not be beat yet. I'll dip the net in readiness. Don't you go down there. Yeah, it's getting on for a couple, I would say. Come on. Come on. Dear Uncle Ollie. Come on. Voila! Yes, it's well over 2. It's near a 2.5, is this? Beautiful fish. Just look at his fins. Just look at his huge pectorals, lovely pelvics. Look at the white edge on that anal fin there. It's like a Bernard Venables painting. Big, fit, healthy fish. By standing here now, I've absolutely ruined the pool. But it seems pointless to just continue catching fish, because actually what I want to do, I want to describe this pool to you. This is a beautiful hatch pool, and it's quite deep too. See this main tongue of water that's shooting down from the hatches? It's splitting about there, and a big portion of current of flow is pushing over to this wall side. And about here, it's hitting this wall, and it's diverting. One current is going downstream, past where my stance was when I was fishing. The other current is coming across here and going upstream, back towards this little building. Just here to my immediate left, you'll see down on the bottom of the pool, a large blonde golden apron of gravel. And in actual fact, I can see now 4 or 5 fish all swimming around, milling around, facing the current. They're facing that way. They're facing that way because the current is essentially coming into this wall edge. And so it's a little bit of a back eddy. It's not really well defined. It's not as well defined as that one over there. You can see the current going down, hitting the ranunculus fronds, making its way over to that camp sheathing, the remains of that camp sheathing, and then there's quite a definite rotation there. A big soft spot in the centre where there's no flow at all, but there's a rotation up the bank side. This is a typical hatch pool. You get this centre funnel of current, and then on each side it rotates back on itself. So you get the shoot through the middle and this rotation on each side. The main tongue of current that's coming down through the side of the hatch pool is just a big conveyor belt of food. It's sweeping food along. Food then gets washed by these undulating currents, gets washed and pushed into this wall side, and the fish are just laying there working to and fro, picking up these morsels of food. Along comes my shrimp, down at their depth, bang, they slam it, and you've got a fish on. When fishing this hatch pool, it wouldn't be a good idea to stand air casting square across into that fast shoot. Far better to position yourself where I did, to take full advantage of the much gentler side currents. Right, I'm off over there now to try that big back eddy. That'll require a bit more line management to fish it correctly. Ah, this is a tasty spot. What I've got here ahead of me is the full back eddy. Drop that one right down the main chute and let it meander round. That was definitely a take. Line shot then. I'm stood on a log jam here, hope it don't give, otherwise I'm in for a ducking. Got an ash tree to my left which I'll just have to watch. Just drop the shrimp ahead and now just let it trundle back, going round this rotation. If it picks up in the current that's going the other way, I'll let it go down there. No. Thought that was a take. I don't know how deep it is. I can't see it bottom here. It's probably 8-10 feet. Just bring the flies up in the water column. Sometimes induce the fish to chase after it. mending board a little bit to coax it to go up the side of those tree stumps, that rubbish. It's gone left to right across the front of me. I just can't see it for a second. Oh, that's funny. 2 fish straight away and now nothing. I've changed now to a mayfly nymph, which is a bigger fly, and also you probably know that they are active swimmers, so I can fish this more aggressively. So what I shall do, I shall swim this in a continuous retrieve through this pool, just like a mayfly nymph migrating to the surface. Just had 2 little taps, 2 intercepts, so I'll just search through this pool and swim it back all the way. Keep the rod tip fairly low. And there was another fish that tapped it, probably a small fish just nipping at its tail. It's my jointed ephemera. It's a jointed fly, so there's no hook in the tail part, but usually they just slam into it. Yes! Well, changing to the mayfly nymph worked. I think the one fly that's a bit active in these pools, moving a bit more aggressively. It's a fairly weighty fish. You can see the bend in my foreweight. It's just sort of stooging about. Come out from there, you monkey. There's a lot of rubbish under this bank here. Old decaying camp sheathing. These big fish in these hatch pools, they don't know where they're going really. They sort of stooge around trying to get depth. He's not a very active fish, but he's using all his weight. Now he's having a little kick. Ah, he's a big lad. I've 3.5 pound leader point on, so I'm reasonably powerful at the tail end. Ah, damn and blast. Never mind. One battered mayfly nymph. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start off by doing a little bit of prospecting with a nymph. I'll probably use a shrimp. I'm going to start from the bridge, work my way up. If I don't get any offers up here, I shall continue on through, all the way through, past this willow and go into this deeper water ahead of me. One of the things about chalk streams, it's very difficult to assess the depth. They look shallow, but when you step in, you get the shock of your life. So by that tree up there, it's probably 5 feet deep. A really ideal spot for a big trout. Well, having got in the water, this run is in fact deeper than I thought. In fact, if I step out there another yard, I'm going to be quite deep. But anyway, this is okay now. I can go. I'm well positioned to go up the side of this ranunculus. You can't sight fish this turbulent water. You've got to fish it blind, watching your minicon, or as Sawyer did, a greased up leader. And I've put some floatant, some grease on the minicon, so that's a nice sight indicator. And I'm just letting it go down this clear channel between the ranunculus. There's an area over there where I can also drop the shrimp. The trouble is, if I go across current, I'm going to get a lot of bow in my line and it's going to tug it out. If I went across to that area over there, I'd probably only stay in there for Yes, and here's a fish. I was just going to say I wouldn't be in there long before I got dragged, but again, a fish nailed it before it dragged. And there's a trout. Come on, don't get in that weed, that's better. You can go under the weed, under the bridge if you want. And that was fairly instantaneous. Took the shrimp very, very quickly. Lovely marked fish, really brown fish. Of course, it's in the fastest of the current. That's better. That's where I want you. Right, straight into the net. This is a nice fish. Firmly hooked in the scissors. And there he is. A little bit lean, but quite fit. There you go. So that was a bit of quick success with the shrimp. If I wanted to fish that soft spot from square across, I've got all sorts of problems. Look at the fast current here. Pulling that straight out, I'm going to plunge my fly straight into the ranunculus. Very, very tricky spot to fish from here. So what I've got to do, if I were to fish it from here, I'd have to drop the fly in, and I'd have to use a series of mends to get that fly to drift down there without too much drag. It's still not as good as an upstream presentation. So you drop it in, put a big mend in immediately, and mend again, and mend again. And you're not going to get as smooth a run as you are when you come directly upstream for it. Just drop it over into this slack bay. There's a fish moved over there. It's really getting pulled out by this fast tongue of water. So it's a bit of a hopeless shot, but it works. It's worked before. Yep. And he's on. And he's a better fish. And he's going under that tree. He knows where his home is. Oh yes. And he's going back to where they were hooked. These wild fish are far stronger than your stockies. When you've got a good fish on, it's all too easy at the last minute to lose a fish by going into blind panic. Make sure the fish is ready for the net before you try netting him. And these haven fish are quite chunky, even though they don't look long. They've got some girth on them and they're hefty. Now he's not a 2-pounder, but he's a strong fish, and I'm only fishing a 2-pound point. Hooking is an inexact science, so I don't know how well he's hooked. You can see this fish is entirely different to a stocky. A stocky would have been in the net ages ago. So he's really digging deep, is this fish. He knows every trick in the book, he knows where to go, he's streetwise. Every time he sees me, he's away. I'm not playing with it. Look at the bend in that rod. I'm laying into the fish. You're either going to lose them or get them at this stage, so you can't start stabbing with the net. He's just kiting below me using the current. And I've got maximum strain on. He's got his head down, he's digging for the bottom. Now he's got his head to the top. Stick the net in. Draw him over the net. So he's still plenty of fight in him. He's a thick-set fish. Look at that. After a minute, he's still bending that foreweight over. Can you imagine a 4-pounder in this river? Every time he sees me, he finds energy from somewhere. is mine now. Well, that's a grand fish, is that? He's hefty, he's probably £1.25, I'd say. I'll slip him back. Hold him into the current, let his gills pump, and away he goes. Well, that were a strong fish. That's as strong a fish as I've had for many a month. Very, very strong fish. Well, that were good. That were good. I wonder if there's another lurking over there somewhere. This time I'm going to tie the heavyweight version of the grey shrimp, the one that's in my book Masterclass. Shrimps, as you probably know, are an absolute must for chalk streams. Most chalk streams have billions of shrimps in them. It's probably, weight for weight, it's probably the most prevalent food form in chalk streams. I say heavyweight because the standard shrimp, the one with the body weighted with lead strips cut from lead foil, isn't heavy enough to get down into the deep swirling runs of, for instance, these deep hatch pools that you get on chalk streams. So this one's going to be a real hatch pool buster. It's going to get really down there deep. So I'm tying it again on the size 12 hook, the curved grub hook, Partridge K4A. First thing, obviously, is to mash down the barb. And to lead it this time, I'm going to use these tungsten sleeves, these tungsten nymph sleeves. And I'm using the medium weight ones because, sorry, not the medium weight, the large ones. You know that tungsten, of course, is twice as heavy as lead. So for little space take up, I'm going to get twice the amount of weight. So when you heft this in your hand, you can feel that it's far, far heavier than you're going to get with a normal leaded shrimp. What you've got to do is to build up the shank with tying thread, and also it helps to make good adhesion. So just in the area where the tungsten bead is going to go, tungsten sleeve is going to go, using any thread. I happen to have power silk handy, which is probably a bit of a waste of an expensive thread, but just build up an area there with thread and keep checking by just sliding the sleeve on. Keep checking that it's a tight fit. Well, when I say tight fit, it's got to just push over and be a snug fit is probably a better expression. So that one's now to be tied off. I made 2 more passes. Just throw on 2 whip finish and snip off the waist at both ends. And now to secure this sleeve in place, I'm going to use super glue. Be careful when you're using this stuff though, because any excess onto skin, and I suppose you know what the consequences are, you'll get yourself well and truly stuck down. So just push that over. Doesn't give you a long time to position it, a few seconds, and that's it. Now you can see that I've got a sharp step down at the front and a sharp step down at the back. Don't worry about it. I know it doesn't look very pretty at this stage, but the dubbing's going to pad this out. Right, the first thing to go on is on with your tying thread, and I'm using spider web. Starting at the front and go over your tungsten sleeve, off at the back, over at the front again, just lock it over a few times. And then trim off your waist, just knock that off. Now tip the hook slightly on its head, because I'm going to be working round the corner. Take your tying thread right down to a position more or less in line with the eye. and then you want your nylon rib to go in. £2 or £3 mono is ideal. Just nip it in your teeth so you get some little jimps as it'll hold, and tie that in. And then what I do, I run that over the top and catch it down there. You can pull that through if you like. And then what I do is take that tag back and lock it down at the back so it's double locked for added security. And if you pull on it, you'll check that it's tight. I just usually give it a pull, and then you can just snip off that little bit of waste. Now lash that down, work it a little bit to the underside. Come to a position more or less in line with the eye, so well round the bend. So from a partridge, one of these grey partridge neck feathers, tweak one out, just strip off the lower fibres and take out a nice clump of, let's say, 7, 8 or 9 fibres. Offer them in. Now you don't want a big overhang like ½ an inch, all you want is about 1/4 inch of tails. Hold them in place and just catch around with a soft wrap. And tie down, tie down, tie down, right to where you tied the rib down. So there's your little tail tuft. Don't bother cutting that, just tether it down. Now bring your tying thread back to this end. Just set the hook up on its nose slightly. Take off another clump, less number this time, probably 5 or 6, or 4 or 5, it doesn't really matter, don't count them, just a clump. But tie these in long, twice as long as the tails at least. And I sometimes, if it doesn't happen automatically, I sometimes coax a few fibres to the bottom and a few to the top. Looks a little bit more natural. And then also tie those butts down. Now sit it back on its head, ready to come to work at this back end again. And now I'm going to put the shell back in. Take the tying thread right down to the base of the tails. Now for the shell back using grey flexibody. There's your flexibody sheet. If you haven't got grey, clear is perfectly acceptable. And the shape I'm cutting out is the shape of, roughly the shape of a rowing boat. You don't need a template. It's got to go from there all the way over the top down to there. So make sure that it is long enough. So a nice, smooth, symmetrical rowing boat shape. So there's your piece of grey flexibody. Peel off the translucent plastic from the backing strip. Offer this up, keep it flat, not on its side, keep it flat, and tie that in flat on top with that little tying in tag and catch it down. Catch it down, catch it down, catch it down. Right back to the base of the tails and test it. Make sure it's in, give it a pull. So now I've got tails in, antenna in, shell back and rib in. Everything tied in now. Bring my tying thread to the front. Just run over the tungsten sleeve. And now I'm ready to dub. Get your dub in. This is Masterclass Finesse River and Stream Blend MC14, sort of a greyish watery olive. Because this hook is bending downhill and the eye is also sloping down, it's of benefit now just to throw on a ½ hitch or a couple of whips just behind the eye. That just stops your thread all dropping off the front. Now you're ready to dub. Pick up your dubbing and just start teasing it forward and spinning it onto the thread. Avoid pills, you don't want any pills, and you can put this on reasonably heavy, spin it on. This pattern's going to fairly eat dubbing, and remember in this area here, just call that the shoulders and that the back end. I'm going to have to taper that down with dubbing, so there's going to be some fairly heavy applications of dubbing in a localised area there. Shorten your working thread, and now simply dub backwards now from eye, going back towards the bend. And at that point there, where the shoulders of the tungsten saddle is, you have to work on the spot there to even that out. And just tighten that in a bit more. And now onto the tungsten sleeve or saddle and go along. Come along, come along, come along. And you can see it is eating dubbing. I'm going to put a bit more dubbing on, tip that up on its head, and a little bit more dubbing on. And now I've dropped off onto the bare hook shank. Just got a little bit of a bump there to dub out. So I need a touch more dubbing still. Any pills you see, just with your thumb against the ball of your finger, just tease them out. And now dub out now to where the start of the flexi body is. It's about there, and slough off the rest. When you get to the end, just make a couple of turns and then throw on a spinning loop. Take off sufficient for you to handle. It's no use making short spinning loops. Make a nice long one over your finger, back to where it came from, round twice, so you can see the dubbing loop is now open. There's a gap there. Down there there's a gap. Now that won't hold anything, so you go over with your thread, over the two arms, and draw them together. Now I've made that come to a tight V. So that's your dubbing loop completed. And now you take your tying thread all the way through the dubbing, all the way back to the head of the shrimp. And when you get up there, drop on, I'll just turn it slightly in the jaws. When you get up to the front, throw on another half hitch or a couple of whips. Again, to stop it diving off. And now I'm ready to make the legs. So what I do is I get 5 grey partridge breast feathers. Look for partridge hackles that have got these fairly square ends, sort of flat at the ends. So I'm taking off about 5. And it doesn't matter from which side, as long as you don't get any with much of a chestnut bar. You can get these light coloured ones as well, they look rather good. 2, 3, 4, 5. And this is what you do. You strip away the lower fibres and get 5 feathers ready like that. And what I do when I'm tying a batch of these, I get all this preparatory work all out of the way before I start tying. So I get myself, I'm doing half a dozen, I get myself 30 or 35 feathers all stripped ready. and 5. Right, so there are my five feathers all prepared. So what I've got to do is, to stop these feathers slipping them out, I've got to anoint them with tacky wax. I used to use head cement at one time, and I can do it with head cement, but for people that are not used to it, doing this spinning loop, the cement will dry before you get the feathers in. So if you can get this stuff, tacky wax, that's better. What you have to do is treat this dubbing loop, both legs of the dubbing loop, with tacky wax. This is brilliant stuff. It's really, really sticky. So you put reasonable deposits of this tacky wax on. If you see any lumps, of course, take them off. It's a great boon to fly tying is this stuff. I stick those 2 fingers in, they open it, and that finger, my index finger, closes it. So it's open, close, open, closed, open, closed. Take a feather, open it, take it right down to there, close to make contact, pull back to set the length. You want about 5 or 6 millimetres at that side. Do that again. Feather number 2, going down. Trapped. Feather number 3, going down, pull back, and trapped. Feather number 4. This is dead easy to do. There's no sweat, no panic. Don't have to let sweat come on your brow. And number 5 going in. Open it, pull along, pull back. So you're looking for even tips along there. More or less even. Now you've got to keep the loop tightly closed. So both sides of the feather now is trapped by this sticky thread. As near as possible to the thread, you snip off the waist side. And you go all the way along, just hold your counsel, snip, 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 all the way along. There's all your tips. Get your dubbing whirl, hook your dubbing whirl in, hook that in there, that through there, like that. Drape it over your finger. You've had tension on this all the time, and spin. And as the twists come on, push them forward. Feed them forward like that. Still spinning like hell, look. Don't spin too much. You can spin that much that you'll pop this thread. As soon as you've got this nice chenille of single fibres, stop. But among there, you've got the 5 original tips of the feather. So there's 1, tweak it out. There's another tip, that's 2. There's a tip there. That's 3. There's a tip, 4. And that's 5. Now you've got a chenille of complete tips. Just give it another little spin for luck. Don't spin it too tight. Remember, you're dealing with spider web. 2 strands of spider web. So now I can treat this exactly like a hackle. Leave your dubbing whirl in. Just pull it deeply into the dubbing. As you pull in deep, it will stand the fibres up at right angles. All these little fibres. And 5 partridge hackles gets you nicely to the front. See how they're all sort of folding and sticking up. And it's these on the underside, so try not to get these trapped on the underside. And I just sort of push back like that. Use the actual loop to push fibres back. And that's the last turn, going underneath and coming up on top of the eye. So that's your nice little chenille of shaggy legs done. And now what you do is you simply shorten your working thread and tie this off using your original spiderweb that's on your bobbin. And you just tie down, lob that over, tie down, lob over. The last thing you want is this to escape, so with spiderweb you can afford quite a lot of turns. And then 2 or 3 more consolidating wraps. And now simply detach the waist of the double loop. Now, for safety now, you must secure this with a couple of whips or half hitches at this stage, because you don't want this to slip off the front. Remember, it's a curved grub hook and it's all sloping downwards. The last thing you want is this to slip off and this to come undone. What you have to do now is, having got these lovely single tapering fibres of partridge in, you've got to make use of them all. So I stroke them down and coax them to all sort of hang downhill. Just pulling them down. And now I'm ready to shell back. So there's your shell back. Pull your shell back over. See that little bit of extra excess there? That's for me to get hold of like that. Don't be tempted to tie it down there like that, because if you do, every time you rib, you stretch the material and you'll get a lump chasing you forward, so that by the time you get here at the front, you'll have a blister like that. So don't do that. You've got to rib progressively. Pull that shell back over, bring your rib round, chicane it through the legs, don't trap your legs, climb on top. This first segment is always the worst. It's a slippery medium itself, and it's biting into this slippery flexi body. So having got your first turn round, you're home and dry. On the first one, I always give it a real good pull to deform it and make it bite in. Centralise your shell back all the time. Do watch that it's central. Remember, radial tension will want to bring it to the side that you're pulling from. So you might just have to steer it there with your thumb. In my case, it'll want to bring the shell back over towards me. So you have to keep looking on top and making sure it's 50-50. When you go on the underside with your rib, make sure by waggling it through the fibres and chicaning a bit that you don't trap any down. You don't want them lashed to the underside, they want to be there prominent. Just wiggle it about and make a path. Make sure also you don't get a doubling at that edge there. Keep pulling on the flexi body. And now I'm just about on the tungsten, or directly over the tungsten bead, so I can give it some welly there. And now definitely I'm on the tungsten bead. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to sit this right way up. In fact, I'm going to sit it slightly head up. Keep pulling on that tag, keep it tight, keep checking that it's central, and check that side that you don't get a flap turned up. Pull every time you make a rib to deform the shell back, so you get these nice segmentations. Split the legs with the mono rib, and now this next rib is going to dive off the front of that tungsten bead. So I don't need to pull so tight now, because all I've got underneath is dubbing as a padding. Keep that tag straight and pulled. Is that looking like a crustacean, or is that looking like a crustacean? Voila! Pull it tight, and now lock off. Bring your tying thread over. Now simply lock over your nylon rib with your tying thread, with your spider web. Try not to take legs with it if you can help it. And lock over several times. Remember, this is essentially nylon to nylon. spider web is a monofilament and your rib is a monofilament, so don't think 2 or 3 turns is going to hold you here. You want a lot of turns, because this has a habit of slipping out if you're not careful. So plenty of turns on there. Tether it well down. Fish won't mind if it sees a little bit of a head. And when you're happy that it's tied off well, snip off your waist. And then simply come through with a 3 or 4 turn, or 5 turn, or 6 turn, or 7 turn whip finish. Hold together, fingers out, pull through, job's a good one. Take your scissors, hook on your hackle pliers onto that tag. Pull that tag quite tight, hook your blade under, nip, snip and tear, snip and tear. Okay, there's a few fibres there that I'll just clean away. A good tool for doing that is my cauterizer. Obviously mind you don't touch the thread, because this doesn't take prisoners. 2 last jobs to do before you commit it to your box. What I do, I just go along with my pliers and just give it a lateral press in. You're not going to flatten it much where the tungsten sleeve is, obviously, because you can't crush that down. I just flatten it where the dubbing is at each end, not too much, and press it as tight as you can where the tungsten sleeve is. And then head cement, just seal over that head. And that's it. That'll do some damage in a hatch pull with that, I'll guarantee it.